one day I would feel fine, and then the next day I couldn't run, and just like that was a little bit of a roller coaster at the beginning.
I think as a pro athlete, that was the hardest thing for me too, because we're so used to like having a training plan and executing the training plan.
Right behind Huerta is Sara Vaughn, the 35-year-old United States stalwart in middle distancing, mother of 4, for full-time real estate agent, but still mixing it up with the elite athletes here and settling into that chase position.
We are here with Sara Vaughn, the incredible mother of 4. And honestly, Sara, I think you were like the first person that I talked to when I found out I was pregnant, because I was like, okay, Sarah's been through it 4 times, and I was terrified of not really knowing what to do. And so I'm just so glad that we can sit down and kind of relive that conversation, and then maybe some other women can benefit from your expertise, because I feel like at this point you have pretty much encountered everything that there is. And so you're like an encyclopedia of knowledge.
So I'm Sara Vaughn. I ran in college at CU. We had our first baby in college, and kind of just climbed through the pro ranks in between babies after that. Most recently made the World Championship team in 2017, and then just got done at the trials last month now, I guess.
And what number of trials was that?
I think that was my 3rd track trials.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in between each kid.
Yeah, which is so amazing. And so you're maybe what ages are your kids right now?
Yep, so the oldest is 14, second one just turned 11, the third one turns 6 on Thursday, so just in a few days, and then the baby will be 2 in a couple of months, so he's 1.
What is your biggest advice on training in pregnancy and kind of the similarities and differences that you noticed?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, there's not extensive like research on pregnant women and working out. So I feel like I learned pretty early just to be really reliant on what Coach Wetmore calls sensory data. Like being a runner, you pay attention to your body anyway. So being a pregnant runner, you're just like really in tune with all of that. And so I learned like you really can't, your body when you're pregnant doesn't let you push too hard. Like you know pretty quickly when you're doing something that you shouldn't be. It feels uncomfortable, or it feels wrong, or it feels, too hard. So just really paying attention to that and not push through anything, but also not being afraid to work up a sweat, get your heart rate up, all of that, because it is proven that all of those things are good for the baby too, and you, and your, mental and physical well-being. So yeah, I just learned really no metrics, like no watch, no GPS when I'm pregnant, no keeping track of paces. I didn't even keep track of my heart rate, just really went on how I felt, and that varied pretty widely within each pregnancy day to day.
How did you handle that day-to-day variability? Because that's something I really struggled with, is
Totally.
like one day I would feel fine, and then the next day I couldn't run, and just like that was a little bit of a roller coaster at the beginning.
I think as a pro athlete, that was the hardest thing for me too, because we're so used to like having a training plan and executing the training plan. So no plan is my best advice. Like do what you can on the day, and it can totally be different than what you were than what you had scripted for yourself. I also learned not to compare my journey to other people's journeys. Like some women, ran through their whole pregnancies, some didn't run at all, and instead of like comparing my plan and trying to make it look like somebody else's, it was just different. And then, you asked like what the differences between the pregnancies, that also proved that theory that you shouldn't compare, because all 4 of them were very different. Like Kiki, my oldest, I literally did strides the morning she was born. Like I felt so good. I ran every day, but I was also 20 years old. And so it's just, your body's different, and I felt good. Like I felt normal and healthy doing that. And then my second one, just 4 years later, was a completely different story. I think I stopped running well before the halfway mark. Just felt uncomfortable, felt unstable, came with a lot of pain that you don't want to ignore when you're pregnant, and you don't want to have to like deal with that throughout your whole pregnancy. So I stopped running pretty early. So it's totally different with how they're situated in there, how you're feeling, yeah, all kinds of things.
Yeah. And that's encouraging because it's like, well, you know, even though I had to stop running on this one, like maybe if I was pregnant again, it would be different.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can like think of that you attribute those differences to now looking back? Or is it just kind of like you don't
I was
know?
gonna say the head size of the baby, but I'm mostly joking. Leah had a really big head. No, I just think it's hard to predict. I did do like tried to stick with my traditional like core routine through my first couple of pregnancies, and I don't actually think that was helpful. So kind of just learning how your pelvis adjusts throughout pregnancy and like allowing for that instead of fighting against it made the last two pregnancies a little more comfortable. You know, you shouldn't do crunches in typical normal ab workouts, and I didn't know that the first couple. So you want to allow for space to expand. You want to allow your body to do what it's trying to do and support it, but not fight against it. So consulting with a pelvic floor specialist, consulting with a prenatal, PT, all of those things were really helpful resources with me the last two pregnancies.
Yeah, and actually on your recommendation was why I like hooked up with a PT right away, because that was, well, you and Neely were like, that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely learned that the hard way, because when I was trying to do those typical core routines through my pregnancy, and it made the comebacks a lot longer. Like it took longer to heal. So I'm pretty sure that was directly correlated to the stuff I was trying to do when I was pregnant. So, just learning how to work with your changing body versus fighting it was really helpful for me.
Yeah. So what kind of specific things would you tell to other women who are like, don't really know much about like the ab separation that happens and like what's normal and what's not, and how to kind of like navigate that?
Yeah, so I guess, so from my understanding, like your abs have to separate to allow for some space in there. So that's going to happen no matter what. You can't really prevent diastasis recti, but what you can do is, well, when you're pregnant and those muscles are separated, if you're crunching and doing contracting exercises, it can make that separation worse, and it can actually make more damage and more scar tissue. So, you know, your return postpartum can be a little more difficult. So not using your abs, like even sitting up, getting out of bed, you know, rolling to your side, using your obliques instead of your front ab muscles, not doing like crunches, not doing planks, things like that. So kind of avoiding that altogether and just being really cognizant of how you're moving your body. And then like doing other supportive things like pelvic floor conditioning and, back, like you could do things to help your back support the weight in the front, but really like letting these muscles in the front, just let them be off limits for a while. Yeah. And on the comeback too, you should not work those muscles out until your diastasis is healing or on the path to healing. Yeah. And that's what a PT can help you decide too, because it's different. It's totally different with each pregnancy. So you never know. And I'd sometimes it'd be like, oh, I think I'm ready, and my PT would be like, yeah, no, you need to give it a couple more weeks or whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I was going to ask you about more at the end, but since we're talking about it now, what were some of those things that you noticed that were different, like on the postpartum, specifically with, like returning to doing core or like returning to any sort of like on the ground exercise? Because that's part of the timeline too. Like the timeline with the pregnancy is different, and then the timeline with the postpartum is different. Yeah.
So we were talking about this the other day. So I think that it took me 2 pregnancies to learn that resting right away postpartum like strict rest, not getting out the door for a walk, not pushing yourself too early, just really, really resting to heal as much as possible in those first weeks makes the overall comeback timeline shorter. So when I would try to return to running too quickly, it would really stretch out that recovery period where you felt halfway healed for twice as long versus like most recently with David, I literally didn't do anything, stayed in bed, feet up, resting, really letting your whole body heal for 2 solid weeks, which feels really tough, especially as an athlete. Like you want to sweat, you want to move your body, you want to get back into the routine. And just because you're feeling well or think you can doesn't mean you should. So just like really staying in bed and healing for a couple of weeks made the return to running a lot more efficient and quick, really. So yeah, so that's my best advice is, you know, fight your deepest urges to like get on the elliptical too soon or go for a run too soon, because in the long run, yeah, it might set you back further than you want.
Yeah. Is there a protocol that you kind of would adhere to when you knew like that you were ready to return? Like what was that?
If you want to dive into
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting to me, obviously, because it's like coming up for me.
Sure. I think from personal experience and advice that I've gotten from postpartum specialists, you should wait until you're done bleeding before you're like on your feet and moving around. As far as like running and stuff, I mean, obviously you're going to be cooking dinner and doing dishes and like you're going to be up moving around plenty. But if you're still bleeding, your body's still healing. So that should be done. And the times that I tried to return to running before that was finished, it actually really prolonged it, which I think like made my overall blood loss more, which makes you tired. Like you're already dealing with iron deficiency and all that stuff. Like don't prolong that if you can avoid it, and complete rest. Like literally change the timeline for me just on that specific thing from like 8 weeks with my first and second or 6 weeks to like maybe 4 weeks.
Oh, wow. So almost cut it in half. Mm-hmm. And that's such a simple thing.
Yeah, just rest.
That you just can pay attention to.
It's hard though.
Like when you
it's
stop
hard.
bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like your body's telling you like, okay. And yeah, you might feel okay. The rest, like your body might even feel pretty settled and good to go, but just wait.
Yeah.
Just wait.
And I was pretty shocked the first time I heard that because I didn't realize that you could bleed for so long after having a baby. But yeah, it's like happens to everybody and it's totally normal.
It's totally normal, totally natural, but if you can like limit your overall blood loss, I think obviously anybody would understand that should be the goal.
Yeah.
Because then, you know, you're minimizing nutrient loss and just speeding up your recovery.
Yeah. Is there any things that you would recommend that new moms do to kind of, that you felt like worked to like support like your health, like with iron, with especially I know you breastfed, so you know, continue to take your prenatal while you're nursing. That's got your folic acid and your iron and all those things that doctors recommend you keep doing. That was super helpful. Yeah, and then like just to set yourself up to really rest, like not exactly what you're asking, but I think my other advice would be to set expectations for your family members and your visitors when they're coming to see you postpartum, to bring food or help with dinner or help with laundry, and like kind of just really set expectations. Like maybe even say like, we're not taking visitors for a couple of weeks because I really need to focus on resting instead of hosting. Learn that lesson the hard way too. So it's okay to like voice those and stick up for yourself and set up those boundaries ahead of time, so that you don't set yourself up to do more work than you want to handle. Yeah. Well, and it's really not that different than preparing just like we would in athletics for going to a race. Like sometimes you have to think about protecting your energy because you know that you're going to have these things that you need to focus on and that you need to do, and so you know, thinking of setting yourself up for success of like who's going to be helpful, like where might you need to draw boundaries, where do you need to advocate for yourself.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. The same type of thing. Like you want to set yourself up to not be frustrated in the moment. And also you're going to be so tired that sometimes you forget about like what you should be doing because you're like just kind of foggy and recovering. So setting those expectations up ahead of time is helpful.
How did you stay positive in the midst of maybe some of these common things that women experience, like nausea and fatigue, and just your body's going through so many changes?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think for me, like subsequent pregnancies, having done it once, having the confidence that I would be okay coming back again, and also like finding, you know, other examples of women who have done it too. Social media is a whole different game now than it was when I had my first, but there's lots of resources, positive resources. Like you want to be careful that you're not, you know, playing the comparison game, but just if you can find sources of inspiration, that helps. And then also like for me, with every pregnancy, I told myself and my family and people who asked like out loud, like, it's okay if I never come back. This is more important. So if you kind of have that aspect of like, I mean, I know other people's obligations are maybe different than mine, but I didn't have anybody I didn't have anything to prove to anybody with each comeback. If I still wanted it, if it was still in my heart to make an effort to return to running, then I would let that fuel me. But I was also okay with the alternative. Like if for some reason it just doesn't come back, that's okay. Kids are more important, this is more important. So it's like just priorities and kind of shifting your thinking of everything. So yeah, my first pregnancy, like I said earlier, I ran through the whole thing. I didn't really have a lot of symptoms. I was lucky I didn't have a lot of morning sickness or anything like that. I had heartburn, but I remember just being like annoyed by it. It wasn't debilitating. So I basically ran and even did like a few longer runs. I didn't really do workouts, but I would do some fartleks and strides, just whatever felt comfortable. Through the whole thing. It was great. And then second pregnancy, my pubic symphysis hurt so badly pretty early on, and I definitely stopped before the halfway point. I feel like probably in the first trimester was like the end of my running. And I would elliptical or do some other machines, but I couldn't bike because it hurt. So I really didn't do much that pregnancy, but also was able to come back. You know, I was at the trials, you know, a year and a half later or whatever. So it didn't really affect like comeback. And then with Cassidy, I was able to run a little bit longer, like maybe 26-ish, 25-ish weeks. I focused more on like pelvic stability and like the stuff that my PT asked me to do, and I felt like that prolonged it. I also incorporated days off, which as runners we're like, run every day if you can, and even if I felt well, I would cycle in rest days. And yeah, with David, I had really bad morning sickness, so basically the day I found out I was pregnant was probably the last day I ran for a good chunk of time. So I found out I was pregnant, you know, at like 6 weeks or whatever. We were on vacation and I did a workout. I did like some quarters at a track there, and then just immediately felt ill like the day after, and I could not, like I didn't feel like running through that. It's miserable. Yeah. And you're already like calorically struggling. And so to like keep running and working out, I mean, I kind of tried, but I didn't run probably from like 6 weeks to 14 weeks when I started feeling a little bit better. And then once the nausea went away, then I started running again and probably ran from like 14 to like 32-ish weeks pretty regularly, like a couple of times a week or 3 or 4 times a week. And then at like the 32 week mark, I started incorporating like a lot of cross training. So I would cross train for a day, maybe run, walk a day, take a day off. And I did that probably for the last chunk of time, last couple of months. But I felt like it prolonged, like cycling in those rest days earlier, and then also taking time off in the beginning. It made it so that I could run longer in my pregnancy, but it was really, really hard because I was so not fit, and also just like getting bigger and heavier by the day. I mean, taking 6, 7, 8 weeks off in the middle of a pregnancy and then trying to get like in shape. It was humbling. It was hard. And I will say, like, probably 6 weeks after he was born, because I didn't run for like 8 weeks. That was definitely 6, 8 weeks after he was born was the most out of shape I've ever been in my whole life. It was hard. It was really hard. But it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. And then this is interesting because we were talking about this the other day too, kind of chronicling how, like, you're at this point where you're the most out of shape you've ever been, and then coming back to the point where you are now, where you just came off of the Olympic trials and your speed has finally been starting to click again.
Yeah.
Like, maybe talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so as far as like comebacks, like with Kiki, it was pretty quick. I mean, I ran at like NCAAs when she was 6 months old.
That's so incredible.
It was, I mean, it was great, and I totally took it for granted, to be completely honest. And then Kalia, it took me probably 6 months where I could start running regularly, in a year where I felt like I was back into shape, and same with Cassidy. And then with David, it was a lot longer. Like like we were just saying, it wasn't until recently that I like really felt like myself. I mean, even before the trials, I'd hit a couple of workouts where I knew my strength was there, but like my speedy athleticism, I felt like that piece was missing for a long, long time. It was also nice too, this comeback, because the trials got moved back a year, so I didn't have that hard deadline of when I wanted to get into shape by. So it was like following my own timeline instead of this external calendar. So I guess I was a little bit easier on myself on this comeback too. But yeah, that was great. Honestly, it was nice. It did take a really long time, and it was. I have a new respect for people who are new to running, because I felt like I was new to running. Like my whole body felt like it didn't know what it was doing. Running felt so foreign. Running fast felt really foreign. So it took a long time, but if you want it, if it's still in your heart, if the passion's still there, eventually you can get back. It just might take a little while.
Just might take a little longer than we want.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Want it to be really quick.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I constantly preach this to people who ask me these types of questions. Like, give yourself grace. Just be easy on yourself. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of changes happening, and like I feel like pregnancy has been the most humbling experience that I've been through yet physically. Like, I just have to slow down. I have to ask for help. We were joking. I like get out of breath going upstairs.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for sure.
Yeah.
It's an athletic endeavor in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Just wait till labor.
Speaking of which, do you feel like since becoming a mom, did that also make you like change how you viewed yourself as an athlete in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think giving birth and like experiencing labor and all of that is like a beautiful rite of passage to becoming a mom that totally changes your perspective of your own body. Even like being a really good athlete before getting pregnant, you still kind of amaze yourself. I mean, even the whole pregnancy thing, like I just remember constantly thinking like, wow, my body's really cool to like do this and that. And yeah, I mean, labor and delivery for sure, you have a new respect of what your body can do. And I think being a runner like gives you a little bit of a leg up on preparing for like that specific endeavor of labor and delivery, because it's hard. But if you're a little fitter and familiar with going, into a pain cave or however you want to word it, like if that's familiar to you, it gives you a little bit of a leg up for sure.
Yeah, because I remember one of the ways that you've described labor to me that's been helpful is almost like a workout, because there's intervals.
Yeah, it's like doing quarters.
Like we get the rest.
Yeah, exactly. You get the rest, and it's like going to the track and doing a set of 400-meter repeats, but there's no, like, you don't know when the end is. And then right when you think you're at the end, then you have to run an all-out 800. Maybe a mile. You don't know.
Finally, just to wrap up, I'm wondering what words of wisdom you have on balancing motherhood with training. I mean, you're doing so many things at a high level. You're like killing it in real estate. You made the Olympic trials. You have 4 kids. You had 3 when Davy came along. Like, how do you balance all of that and still train?
Yeah, so I think my best advice is that there's no such thing as perfect balance. My priorities shift month to month, day to day, hour to hour. You can't wear more than one hat at a time. So, part A of my answer is there's no such thing as balance, especially when you're going after big things. Like when I'm preparing for the Olympic trials, real estate gets put on hold, and we get lots of takeout and lots of babysitting hours, and you're just like trying to focus on that big thing, and it shifts throughout the year. Like now, post-Olympic trials, I'm trying to focus more on my work and not be so strict about training stuff. So it shifts all the time. There's no such thing as balance. And also, to go along with that is, when you're putting something, when you're prioritizing things, and you put something on the back burner, sometimes, especially as women, that comes with a lot of guilt, whether that's like having a messy basement or, loads of laundry piling up, whatever it is, like just really letting go of that and like disassociating my identity as a runner or a mom or a realtor to like those external things. Like you just have to let that go and focus on what's important.
Sara, thank you so much for just sitting down and talking about all of these things. Again, like I said, I think this is going to be really helpful for other women who are just finding out they're pregnant or are struggling through maybe parts of pregnancy and postpartum that are difficult. And so just really, really appreciate it. And also, Sara, what's next for you?
So I've got some racing left to do this summer. The Olympic trials, came and went, but that's not the end of the road for me. So I've got a few other races planned. I'm doing a mile on Friday in North Carolina and a 1500 after that, and then we'll see. And beyond that, I don't really know yet, but I'm okay with that. Like we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's been a fun summer because there's so many domestic races going on, and more than ever before.
Yeah, a ton of opportunity for sure.
And so definitely not over after the trials.